My name is Matthew Rowe, and I'm the CEO of the Campaign for Wool here in Canada and its parent organization, the Canadian Wool Council. Thank you all for joining our latest our first spring, Spinning Yarns speaker series. This series was created at the request of you to provide an insight into the work of the campaign in Canada, to hear from and listen to people who are really making a difference on the Canadian fiber scene, and to explore ways where we can improve the industry for the benefit of all Canadians. So we're really lucky today to be able to have a speaker that really brings together a lot of the different facets of the industry in one person. So Anna Hunter, many of you may know already, but Anna is, of course, a tireless advocate for Canadian wool. She raises sheep. She has a mini mill. She is involved in promoting the artisanal sector, in finding solutions for how we can scale up and create more opportunities for our fiber. And she's recently, if that wasn't filling up enough of her time, and we were speaking earlier, she does have kids as well on top of that. She's also found time to write a book about the industry here in Canada, and we're delighted to be able to have her to come and speak to our group today. Our work with the campaign here in Canada is all about both celebrating what we have and trying to find a path to the future. And Anna is a great example of someone who is motivated to work with wool, to improve wool, to work with producers at every step of the value chain and come up with creative ideas for how we can make a better industry for everyone. So without further ado, let's take it over to Anna to talk a bit about her experience in fiber, her new book, and of course we'll have lots of time for questions. So be sure to get those down, and Alyssa and I will be facilitating that afterwards. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Anna Hunter.
Thanks, Matthew. Thanks, Alyssa. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Lots of familiar faces, and I'm also recognizing some equally tired lambing, shearing season faces. So if I nod off, or if you nod off, I understand completely. Before I start, I just want to acknowledge with a spirit of gratitude that I get to present to you today, and I get to steward land on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene people, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. I think with that land acknowledgement comes a commitment to follow through with land acknowledgements. And historically, farming, including sheep farming in Canada, has been a tool of colonization. So I think as we talk about sheep and wool and what that looks like in the Canadian context, we must move forward in a spirit of reconciliation. And so I just want to frame my presentation today within that acknowledgement and that commitment to reconciliation. I am going to share my screen.
Anna, you're muted.
There we go. Now it's good. Okay, great. So a lot of you on this call, I already know, or you know my story, so I don't want to go into it too much, but to give you a little bit of context, I am a first-generation farmer. I did not start out as a farmer. I've had a little bit of a circuitous route to get here. The first picture on this slide is me in 2007 at a housing rally in Vancouver, British Columbia, where I worked as a housing advocate, a legal advocate in the downtown east side, representing people in evictions and just in general around homelessness and housing scarcity. In 2009, I was a little burnt out and I needed a break. So I opened up Bad Anna's, not your mama's yarn store. It was a community-based yarn store in East Vancouver. And my goal with that store was to sell only yarn and fiber that had been grown and manufactured within 100 miles of the Lower Mainland. I wanted this like 100-mile yarn store. Sadly, after about 2 months of boots on the ground, I realized there was going to be no yarn on my shelves. So I pivoted and focused on local designers and on really building community within East Vancouver. But that was the first sort of moment in my mind where I was like, there is a big disconnect between all these sheep farms that I'm seeing and all these knitters who absolutely love knitting and desire to source locally. So fast forward a few years, my husband Luke and I had 2 kids, and Vancouver just wasn't an option for us anymore. So we started looking for alternatives. And in 2015, we moved to Manitoba. My husband's family's in Winnipeg, so we had some connection, and we really wanted a better source to our food and our fiber for us and for our kids. And we realized that if we moved to Manitoba, then we could afford that sooner than later. So we made the move. And within a year, we had started our sheep farm. I was looking to put this presentation together, and I found this little collage I had made of our first year of lambs. And it brought some tears to my eyes, seeing just how little both my kids were and how little the sheep were back then. Some of those are still in our flock today. So in 2016, we started our sheep farm with Shetland sheep. And, you know, we spent a lot of time in that first year just making every mistake in the book and really kind of figuring out what it looked like to both take care of animals that we'd never done before, to manage and steward land in a way that built healthy soil and a healthy ecosystem and regenerated our land base rather than take away from it. And also just the added challenges of marketing and selling and manufacturing wool. The first of those big barriers being that there was absolutely no wool processing in Manitoba. I know it seems like I probably should have looked into that before I started a sheep farm, but I sort of assumed that there just would be access. So once we realized there wasn't, I was on a mission to change that. So in 2018, we opened up our wool mill. We have Belfast mini mill equipment, so we're a small mill. Lots of production, we like to say, for our tiny little space. So Luke, that's him in the picture. My husband, he and I run the mill together, where we process yarn from our flock. We buy wool from other Canadian sheep farmers to turn into retail yarn. And we also custom process for other farmers and consumers or other producers of wool. So during my sort of journey, my own journey, once I moved here and started my own sheep farm, was to really dive into sheep breeds. I owned a yarn store, and I probably couldn't have told you the name of more than 3 sheep breeds. So it was a really interesting, eye-opening experience to learn that there were over 200 breeds of sheep out there, and that they all had such unique character qualities and characteristics, and that when I used these different sheep breed wool, it absolutely changed the way that my knitting, that I knitted. So I dove into this. I did everything that I could to learn as much as I could, started exploring the different sheep breeds that exist in Canada and how they exist on certain land bases based on the qualities of those sheep and also the land. And I started teaching about it. And the 3 sort of main takeaways that I tried to impart to people when I taught about it was that when you use breed specific wool, or when you seek it out, it preserves those breeds. It helps with those endangered sheep breeds. It supports small farms and mills, and it informs our fiber arts practice. It adds this depth to how we work with wool. And I really wanted to share that. That love of wool and that desire to share that kind of was expanding beyond just the people I had access to teaching. And that's when this idea of a book showed up. I really wanted to tell the story of the specific breeds across the country, what those breeds are good for in terms of their wool and how we knit or crochet or spin or weave or felt with it. And also why some of those sheep breeds are specific to the various land bases we have in Canada, with such a huge landmass and such different temperatures and climates and landscape, how those things all come together. So this was sort of my vision for the book. And I wrote a book proposal, and I talked with Kim Worker from 910 Publications, and she said, this is awesome, this is great, we're on board. I think your ideas might change. And I was pretty sure that they wouldn't. So I packed up with my good friend Christelle, who I'll talk about in a minute, to Arlette, who has a big Corriedale sheep farm in Watrous, Saskatchewan. And you know, we got out of the truck and were immediately surrounded by multiple dogs, herding dogs of hers, and we started walking out to the pasture. And she took us for a walk, a 10-minute walk up this ridge. This is the picture of that walk. And she started telling me about how this land used to be a commercial grain farm in her partner's family, and how it was not producing well. The land was void of nutrients and minerals, and it was not producing well. And her and her spouse said there has to be a better way. So they got together with conservation, and they converted the land back to native grassland, and they started grazing sheep on it. And within the last 10 years, they have been able to transform this struggling piece of land into a healthy, vibrant ecosystem with a variety of native plants growing and sheep that are a part of that ecosystem. And as we walked back, we hadn't even seen sheep yet. We'd been walking for like 20 minutes and we hadn't even seen sheep yet. And I was furiously taking notes. At this point, Christelle looked over and said, why don't you record it on your phone? Which just goes to show that I am not quite on the age cusp of thinking that I should record things with my phone, and I was taking notes. So I got my phone out, started recording it, and right then and there, the book changed. It changed from being a book that was just about sheep breeds and land to a book that was also telling the story of how farmers are integrating sheep with land and wool. So that became the new sort of focus of the book. So Christelle, pictured here, this is us at Peggy's Cove in Nova Scotia. We managed to take a little bit of time on every single one of our trips to enjoy ourselves and be full-on tourists. Christelle is my neighbor. I moved to Manitoba from Vancouver and happened to land half a mile from the best person in the whole entire world, who is now my best friend and the photographer for the book. So Christelle and I got sheep at the same time. We've been learning all there is to learn about sheep and wool together. And that's been such a fantastic experience. But she's also an incredible photographer and artist. So when this book was being, when I was sort of dreaming up this book, it had to include the photos from Christelle. So we traveled from coast to coast. We didn't get up north, partly because there's very limited sheep up there, and we really focused this book on sheep and sheep wool fiber, and then also just limited by time. We were able to interview many different farmers and with many different breeds and different approaches to land management and sheep and wool. And it was a fantastic 2 years of travel and learning and talking to other farmers. Out of all those travels and all our interviews, there were a few main themes that emerged that I just saw over and over and over again. And the first one was sheep and climate change mitigation. So how can sheep be a part of a healthy land management strategy that works to take more carbon out of the atmosphere and sequester it in our soils, and work to change the tide on climate change? So from left to right, at least on my screen, Dogtail Ranch. So Arlette, like I mentioned before, using her Corriedale on this large range to manage huge grasslands. Carrie Woolley, the middle picture, that's a picture of two of her Coopworth sheep running along a bank of solar panels. And Carrie was incredibly inspiring. She runs a silvopasture operation. Silvopasture is this combination of grazing animals and trees. So so you're integrating those two managements in a way that benefits both. So her family has a large fruit operation, so huge apple and sweet sour cherry operations. And, whereas before they were constantly using fossil fueled machines to graze or to trim the grass in between all their orchards. Now they're using sheep. So it's feeding sheep that are growing wool, and then also depositing their nutrients in the form of manure to their fruit operations. So they also run a huge flock of sheep under these solar farms to take care of the grass underneath the solar panels. So just some really innovative ideas that are working to fight climate change. And then Brenda Shway, the last picture, who is focusing on regenerative agriculture in Ontario, using sheep to manage land, to integrate that soil fertility through manure and adaptive managed grazing, and prioritizing land and ecosystem health. Worried that my pictures didn't come through. Well, you'll have to take my word for it or look at the book. But the second theme that came through was breed preservation. So looking at these breeds that are at risk of extinction or compromised in their ability to be prevalent in our community and across the world. And so Liana of Lone Sequoia and her Navajo churro sheep. And that is a very particularly interesting chapter. I hope you can read it. About how those have been at risk and how she's working to keep them going. And then Stacy of Hidden Meadow in Nova Scotia and her Lincoln Longwool sheep. So breed preservation was this other big theme that came out. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I don't know why my pictures aren't coming through. The other one is historical relevance. So Christelle, my neighbor, of course, and her raising of Rideau Arcots, which are a breed that were actually developed in Canada. And Tara Klager of Providence Lane and her Border Leicester, and the role that sheep played in the settling of Canada and the movement of sheep and ruminant livestock across Canada. And then Ruth from Upper Brook Farm, who her North Country Cheviot sheep have been in her family for decades, and her dad was actually integral in bringing certain sheep breeds to Canada and developing those flocks in Canada. And then the final one was wool marketing. So how farmers are using innovative techniques and strategies to get wool that is raised and manufactured in Canada into the hands of knitters and crocheters. So Audrey and her East Frisian sheep from Quebec, and just the beautiful work that she has done with them. Beatriz from Fiber and Forge and her BFL sheep, and the unique ways that she has marketed it. And her sheep are all defined by the names of the individual sheep they came. So she's really promoted this connection. And then Lori from Disdero Ranch with her Romney sheep, and the way that she's partnered with pattern designers and shown up at big, huge knit shows and markets, and really brought that wool into the mainstream. Are you guys seeing any pictures? This is not good. Okay, give me a second. Apologies for that.
Oh, Anna, you're muted again.
Is that better? And you can see my photos, yes? Okay, great. Sorry, everyone.
All I see is you, Anna.
Okay. I'm glad you can see me. That at least means that if it's my internet, that it's not.
Anna, you're not currently sharing your screen.
Okay. How about now?
Excellent.
Okay. So after we, as we went ahead with our book and sort of the plans changed from just focusing on breed yarn and sheep breeds, I didn't want to lose the fact that we also wanted to produce something that would inform people's knitting or their crochet or their fiber arts practice. So Kim from 910 Publications had the great idea that along with the Kickstarter to get this book going, that we would do a simultaneous pattern ebook. So we worked with, I worked with 5 designers from across the country and featured 5 sheep breeds in these patterns. So there are 2 shawls, a pair of mittens, a pair of socks, and a hat. And you can find this book. It's an ebook that you can find from 910 Publications or from my website. And it really is a way to transfer this knowledge about these sheep breeds into these patterns and how they actually can work. So I recommend you check out that book. I know a lot of folks have already started working on those patterns, and it's exciting to see them come about. And all the patterns are on Ravelry as well for all you knitters out there. So this is just one example. This is the Romney wool from Disdero Ranch. It's the Radical shawl designed by Caitlin French. And just in terms of a little bit of an intro, Romney sheep come from the Romney Marsh, a salt marsh in the southeast of England, and it was made habitable by all these ancient systems of drainage ditches and seawalls. Romney is in the long wool category with a staple length of 4 to 8 inches. Staple length is the length of wool fiber from tip to tip. It has a fiber diameter of 29 to 45 microns, and that refers to the actual diameter of the fiber, but it also informs how we experience that wool next to our skin. And then the fleece weight is between 8 and 12 pounds. So a pretty good amount of wool from one animal. And obviously this has been undyed. So Romney sheep also come in a variety of colors, and that's part of what informs their beauty. So you can find this wool from Disdero Ranch, and all the other wools from the pattern collection are available across the country from those farmers. So just gives you a little bit of an idea of how that pattern book looks and the kind of information that we include in it. So just a look of the front and the back of the book, and I think Alyssa is going to put a link in the chat on where you can purchase it and where you can get it from. I won't go too much into this. I know Campaign for Wool has worked hard to share information about what the current status of Canadian wool is and where we kind of want to go. And so this is some of my own take on it. Currently in Canada, we have just over 1 million sheep, and they produce roughly 3 million pounds of wool a year. Some of this is a little outdated since COVID. This is, I created this right before COVID, but 90% of all the wool in Canada is shipped overseas for production. And unfortunately, very little of it shows back up on our shores, and what does often isn't for our knitting or our fiber arts or our textiles. A lot of the Canadian wool clip isn't textile quality. Unfortunately, because of this scenario that we're in, we're also not adequately compensating Canadian farmers for their wool, and we're caught in a catch-22 where Canadian sheep farmers aren't financially incentivized to grow better wool, so they don't grow better wool, and then it doesn't get a higher price globally or domestically, and we just keep going around and around. My book really focused on the farmers who are focusing more on fiber production in their operations on their sheep farms, or they're doing both. They're both doing lamb meat production, and they're also focusing on wool. And I conducted a study in 2020 of a lot of those sheep farmers across the country that are focusing on wool production and marketing wool. And, I asked, one of the questions or one of the results that came out of this survey was, what are the top barriers to marketing and to selling your wool? And I went into this study assuming that the answer would be processing time. We don't have enough infrastructure. We've lost so much of our infrastructure over the last 100 years. And most farmers have a really hard time, either because mills are far away or they don't exist in their region, or the cost of getting that wool processed or shipping it is just exorbitant. But the number one challenge was marketing. Again, over and over, each farmer had said, I have such a hard time, you know, I'm taking care of sheep, I'm managing shearing, or I'm hiring a shearing, I'm lambing, I'm, you know, moving fence, I'm moving sheep, I'm moving animals, I'm taking care of their health. I don't have time to get that yarn into the hands of consumers. And so I guess out of that research, one of my goals was, how can we shrink that space between farmers that are working so hard and consumers that obviously want wool. The number of knitters and crocheters, fiber artists in Canada has grown exponentially, and there is the anecdotal desire to purchase and find that, source it locally. So how can we shrink that? So how I want to end this, at least before we have some time for Q&A, is to talk about what that future looks like. So for all of us individually, the first thing I like to suggest is connect with your local fiber farmer. Who in your region is growing wool, and how could you make a connection there? I've developed a website, canadianwool.org. It's a great space to learn more about Canadian wool, but also it's an open source place where farmers can put up their information. There's a breakdown province by province of who's raising what breed and how you can get in touch with them. I encourage you to go find out where the sheep farmers are in your region or your province and see if you can connect with them. Purchasing wool from a small sheep farmer or a large sheep farmer in Canada is going to make a huge difference to their bottom line. Even if it's just once a year, you know, choose a local wool to purchase over and above your commercial yarn purchases. The other suggestion I would say is use breed-specific yarn and fiber when you can. If we seek out those specific breeds, we're going to help those farmers that are raising them, and we're going to keep those breeds going. And it'll make such a difference in your knitting or your crochet or spinning, whatever you do. It'll make a huge difference. And then finally, and this is where my big passion lies, is how can we build up regional wool supply chains? What is it going to take for us to rebuild local wool economies across the country? And, you know, I love the big vision of Campaign for Wool. They have such a fantastic vision of how to get there. And I think we need many answers. And so for me, the regional wool supply chain is the answer. So I'm just going to quickly read a little bit from the conclusion of my book, because I feel like it succinctly wraps up how I envision that. Imagine if each of our regions in Canada had a centralized hub for scouring. Scouring is the washing of wool, and this is the current bottleneck for most of our mills. This process, once a scouring mill is set up, then existing small and medium mills can increase their production because they have access to more scoured fleece. New innovative businesses could emerge, like wool carding for insulation, because the scouring is no longer a process they have to be responsible for, and the bottleneck problems would be gone. So now we could have mills processing more yarn, which means they could supply local indie dyers with more consistent product for their businesses. Dyers could dye the yarn and then wholesale it to their favorite local yarn store, which in turn could get the yarn into the hands of knitters, crocheters, spinners, and weavers. Now, yarn stores could have 20 to 40% of their stock as Canadian grown and milled yarn, instead of the maybe 2 to 5%, which is the current average for our yarn stores across the country. The next step would be pattern designers being able to feature Canadian wool in their designs and generating even more demand for that wool. Before we know it, Canadian grown and manufactured wool would not be such a new or rare item. It would be everywhere, creating security and sustainability for farmers and mill operators, protecting heritage and at-risk breeds of sheep, supporting local manufacturing, and creating jobs, especially in rural communities. Robust regional wool supply chains would decrease Canada's greenhouse gas emissions and carbon footprint. And through land management on regenerative sheep farms, we could be sequestering more carbon than we release. Look at that. We have just created a vibrant local textile economy that benefits the land. This book is a call to action to seek out local fiber wherever you live. Get to know your local fiber farmers and see what they're doing on their farms to build community, transparency, and environmental regeneration. Commit to buying more local yarn and fiber because every purchase makes an enormous difference to the farmers who grow it. Add your voice to the growing chorus of support for sheep farmers and local wool, and let's build a better, healthier path forward. I know we can do it. I know we must do it together. So I am going to, those are some ways that you can follow me or see more of what I'm up to. And I am going to stop sharing and open it up for questions. How did I do for time? I think I left for questions.
Before we start, can I just call upon Kim? Kim, what stores across the country can people find Anna's book?
I wish I had a list, but I don't, because we are ourselves not distributing. But I know that there are yarn stores in at least major cities across Canada as well. I've heard from some sheep farming associations in provinces across the country, and also some farmers who want to carry the book. So the book is available for wholesale, but we're not distributing it. So I wish I had a list. I've actually asked the distributor for a list so that we can keep a list on our website. But thank you. It's an excellent question. But I suppose an easy answer is to call your local yarn store. And if they don't carry it, let them know it's available and they could carry it. It's important to us that we're not the only direct sellers of the book. We want to support the entire industry across the country by enabling other small businesses to carry it.
Thank you. Otherwise, you can find it on the website. But yeah, great initiative to support yarn stores. Thank you again, Anna. We'll start. Judith has her hand up, so let's get it started.
I can't hear you, Judith. Nope.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can.
I'm thoroughly enjoying my wool this year. Last year I got it spun. This year I'm getting it as the fleece. And I was just very excited that your book has come out, because for a long time I also watched your creation of the database that you were making. So I wanted to say hi, because I've been interacting with you for a year and a half now, as well as to let people know that are in Toronto that this book has been promoted by Yarns Untangled, which is an independent yarn store in the Kensington Market. And Amelia has posted that, and I'm so happy your book is there. Plus, I'm also promoting it with Flock Talk in the States with the, I'm part of the Wool Channel. I'm sure you've heard of the Wool Channel, Anna. And so every time I see that, I post it to everybody there. So I'm hopeful that, you know, the American groups can also participate in this, because they're building in the States as well. And it's all about the promotion of wool and making our land more productive. So thank you for presenting today.
Thanks so much, Judith. And just as a heads up, Judith was referencing, I run a breed specific subscription. So you can get 100 grams of breed specific yarn or 4 ounces of spinning fiber for once a month for a full year. And it includes like a little breed card that talks about the breed and how it can be best used. And I source it all Canadian, mostly. Oh yeah, Carrie's showing a nice picture of the most recent East region, which actually comes from Audrey's farm. So thank you so much for that, Judith. That's so, and no, I have been so, I'm so filled with gratitude for the connection between so many fiber artists and myself on my journey. So I appreciate that. And I want to spread the love of that to all the other sheep farmers.
Okay, sorry.
It's Clara Parks, who also promotes your work, Anna. And I think most people know who Clara Parks is and the book she's written. So she's a big spokesperson for you as well.
That's gonna make me blush.
So for questions, you can either put them in the chat or you can raise your hand. We have one from Catherine here. Can you describe what a small or medium scouring facility would look like? Wondering what infrastructure would be required. Thank you.
That's a great question. For me, I think the future of scouring depends on the regions that want to put it in. And I'm a strong believer that we need regional facilities, not just one big one. I think when we look at carbon emissions, it doesn't make sense to be shipping wool across Canada to one central location. So one of the things that we're looking at here in Manitoba is the Kiwi Scour. It's a machine from New Zealand, which can do a medium amount of scouring. And with that machine, we could most likely deal with the majority of Manitoba's wool. And of course, water and energy are the big barriers to scouring because it requires a lot of both. So also finding ways where we can utilize the least exploitative resources for both heating that water, recycling that water, and using it, I think are important key considerations, which is why I think if we focus on a regional response, we can come up with things that work for each community based on those land bases.
And just quick question: what would be the volume we'd be looking at, just to be able, so people can see the difference between sort of a mini mill processing and the regional hubs that you're talking about?
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know about other mini mills. I know Alex is on this call, so she might have a different answer. But in our mill, we can wash between 12 and 15 pounds a day with our water and our energy and just our capacity. So we're looking at 12 to 15 pounds a day. I think when Leah Little did a presentation a few months ago, she was saying they can wash 600 pounds a week. I believe that's what she said. So in those larger mills, and a Kiwi Scour is about half of that. So they do around 400 pounds. Give or take, right? This all depends on how many hours you want to run those machines and how much space you have to dry wool. Sometimes it's not really about the washing, it's about the drying. So to give you an idea about the scope. And you know, provinces like Quebec and Ontario, they have a lot more wool to deal with than provinces like Manitoba or Nova Scotia. So if we can respond to those conditions with different sized operations, then we're limiting a waste of both resources and time.
Another question from Jana, Clune Forest Breeder here in Ontario. What is the best way to promote myself as a farmer?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, my first answer would be to get yourself on Canadian Wool website. I'll see if I can put a link in the chat, but there's a breakdown of province by province. Just fill out the form and you'll get up there right away. And I guess the other way I would say is who in your region and who's already mobilizing in your region that you could partner with. So are there fiber festivals that are happening in your region? Is there a fiber shed, Upper Canada I don't know where in Ontario, but Upper Canada Fiber Shed is in Ontario. They're a great organization to be connected with. Could you collaborate with someone who is connected to consumers that you could partner up with and take some of that burden off your shoulders? Showing up at fiber festivals and just getting your name out there is a great way to meet with people who want to support fiber farmers. I mean, this is maybe not an exciting answer, but I think creating a business plan and a marketing plan for your wool is a brilliant idea. And I think as farmers, we are really invested in land and animal management. And we sometimes forget that marketing is equally as important and takes so much time and energy. So Jana, if you want to reach out to me, I'd be happy to point you to some of the resources that I use and some of the tools and tricks that I've used and that I've helped other folks use. So please feel free to reach out to me. I can put my email in the chat too.
Thank you. Margaret is asking, did you find competition between sheep farmers and those who raise alpaca? I don't know the stats. The last 3 fiber festivals I've attended, there seemed to be as much alpaca yarn on offer as sheep's wool.
You know, we have a lot of amazing alpaca farmers in Manitoba. I was so shocked when I moved here how many alpaca farmers there were. I don't notice it as petition. I mean, I think we all seem to really work together and get along. We have similar goals. I think the alpaca farmers have done an incredible job of marketing alpaca fiber across the country. I think we could learn a lot from them in the way that they promote alpaca. But so I don't see the competition. I just see it as more opportunities. And I think, you know, rising tide lifts all boats, including those that have alpacas, those that have sheep, and those that have whatever other fiber animals, and hopefully even cellulose at some point down the road.
If I could just jump in, I have to seize the opportunity, because of course we did a project a couple of years ago that also included alpaca as well, and that was also to your point about local supply chains, which was the 100-mile blazer. So I just, anytime I can shamelessly self-promote, so that was the blazer there, and then again the majority of that supply chain was all within 100 miles of the city of Toronto, but it did include an alpaca content in addition to wool. So obviously the fibers work well together, especially when creating gorgeous garments. So just had to throw that out.
Yeah, awesome.
Do sheep and alpacas get along though? Another comment here, Anne says she washes 10 pounds a time and 40 to 50 pounds a day, and she is from A&B Fiberworks in Alberta. Judith says Romy is a great spokesperson for Upper Canada Fiber Shed. Anna, you are part of Pembina Fiber Shed, is that correct?
Yeah, Pembina Fiber Shed, but you got it.
And Judith says that the wool is entirely different for use and provides options for our knitting addiction. Tara has confirmed that sheep and alpacas do get along, not only as a fiber in garments, but when they are put together. Any more questions? Just chat or
all we need now is the script for the animated series that should obviously result in that knowledge. So.
I'm just waiting. Follow for any more questions. Or else we can wrap up. Last call for questions.
I can jump in. So Anna, you know, again, you were talking about marketing as being an area to provide support. As you know, the campaign does provide sale kits to support independent sellers. Is there something that isn't available right now that you would like to see? Or beyond even just, you know, what we do, like what are some of the things that you would like to see made available to people working in this space where that they don't have access to?
That's a good question. I think the answer might be vastly different depending on where sheep farmers are in their journey. I think, are you speaking specifically about marketing tools or whatever?
Yeah, materials, but it could be services as well. Like, so yeah, our model for many years is, you know, we provide the point of sale kits. We also do these high level retail projects and media campaigns using, you know, PR services. You know, we do but you know, we did the films last year, and we hope to be continuing as well of the fabric of Canada. But again, we want to be sure that we're covering the bases, but also again, if there's something that isn't being done or could be done or provided that could support people working in this space. So just have to ask sorry to put you on the spot, but just
no, that's okay. I mean, I think we're figuring our way through how to collaborate on this, all of us across the country, and we're a big country and we all have different focuses and very limited time. And I think in many ways we're figuring out how to do a better job of collaborating and being and making Canadian wool a priority. I truly believe, and this isn't necessarily a solution for Campaign for Wool specifically, I think it's a solution for all of us, is without adequate infrastructure, we are limited in how much we can produce. And I know there's a few other mill owners on this call, but I am so far behind on what I can actually do in a day and a week and a month in terms of the farmers that want their product produced and dyers that want yarn to use and the textile makers who want finished fabric that they can use. We just don't have enough, and we have raw materials. We just don't have the processing. So we need to solve that piece. This is, from my perspective, we really need to solve that infrastructure piece. And I think we need to work together, a united front, all of us that care about wool, to advocate for that. There is no other agricultural industry in Canada that I know of where you have to wait 12 to 18 months to get your agricultural product to market. But that's what most sheep farmers are facing if they want to process it domestically. So how can we make this a campaign where we're asking for what we need as farmers and as processors is more investment and what I'm calling patient capital. We need a patient capital model where we know that it's going to take some time to build that infrastructure and to build up those products to then see the return on our investment. So let's really invest in the Canadian wool industry with a patient model, because we know on the other end it'll be thriving and it'll be growing, and there is the market for those Canadian wool products. Yeah, so that would be my big answer, is we need infrastructure. Let's all work for it and advocate for what we need.
Fabulous.
Kathy also is talking about infrastructure. Lack of infrastructure is often mentioned as being an obstacle to industry growth. Are there any government incentives for business to establish more scouring or other types of mills?
Well, it's kind of interesting, and maybe this is like too deep into the like nerdy agricultural, but the federal and provincial government have a cost shared agreement every 5 years for agricultural spending that they distribute to all different forms of agriculture in Canada. And they just announced all the priority areas for SCAP, Sustainable Cap Agreement, which is shared funding. And there is a great one that I think in many ways a scouring facility could fit in those categories. Or could fit within those priority areas. So I do think there's money within Agriculture Canada, specifically around processing. And to be honest, I think there's also collective support. I think if we can collectively get together, we could see these things happen in our regions. We just need leadership. And I think Campaign for Wool is demonstrating some excellent leadership on their front. I think that there's other leaders in different regions that are really championing wool and this investment in infrastructure. I certainly have a big plan. I'm not ready to like fully divulge yet, but I think like there's an army. I like to think about it as an army of knitters and crocheters and felters out there who are like, just tell me when to go and I'll be there and we'll make it happen. So I think we just need to continue working together and pursuing these solutions in creative and innovative ways. I don't know if that answers your question. Yes, there's money. We just need to be organized and get it.
Sounds good. Judith is asking, how can the ball bands for yarn include a log that highlights Canadian wool?
So I don't know. It would be interesting. I don't know, Matthew, if Campaign for Wool is coming up with any sort of cross-Canada branding campaign, but through Canadian Wool, we've actually been developing a logo that would indicate on yarn ball bands and fiber ball bands that it was grown and manufactured, and it would have a QR code to go back to trace it, trace it to the actual farm and or mill that it came from. So we are slowly developing that. If anyone wants to know more, just go to canadianwool.org. But I have a feeling Campaign has a plan too, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I would love to kind of connect with what you're doing on that, because it's certainly the work of our National Policy Committee right now is kind of the pre-step to having a logo is to create a national wool standard. So that's what we're working on right now, and we'd love to kind of plug that in with the work that you're already undertaking there, because we want to be able to have the traceability, but it's also in terms of, it's like anything in this industry. As soon as you start to tackle one part, you're like, oh, but then we also need to do this, and then everything is interwoven, if you might say. But the ultimately, again, to be able to have something that provides guidance to producers in terms of how they prepare their clip and everything like that, but that also can be used from a marketing perspective to give confidence of the end consumer of that this is, Canadian wool as pure as the driven snow. That's a working tagline for being able to give confidence that it's reflective of the landscape. It's reflective of our very high standards. Again, this is something we've learned at the international level, that even if it's not always deserved, we do have a very good global reputation, and that's backed up by very strong animal welfare legislation, very strong practices amongst our producers. And so to have that all kind of wrapped up in, to distill down to that one logo that says all of that, I think that's what we're working towards. So again, long story short, would love to connect with your initiative as well to ensure that we're not duplicating. But yeah, I think that's being able to tell that story better to consumers is what we're all sort of after.
We have a question from Nicole. I used to work at a school that has a textile program, and it often felt like no one wanted to share where they got their spinning fiber because they were scared to lose their source or raise their prices beyond what they could keep up with. Do you have any advice for someone who's just starting, where to look or who to start working with? Where should beginners look for raw wool?
Yeah, great question. I'm just going to be a broken record, but I recommend you go to canadianwool.org and look it up by the province, and then also see if there's a fiber shed in your community. And I don't know where you live, but you could also email me, because I have quite a connection, so I send along some names, and farmers are just waiting to get their raw wool to people. So yeah, try those two spots, and if you don't have any luck, then reach out to me for sure.
Thank you. Always great.
And that was kind of the goal of canadianwool.org, was to allow any farmer who has wool for sale and wants to do a private sale, not sell to wool growers, to put it up there, and then for any consumer to go check it out, so that there's no gatekeeper. It's just open source. People can go and look, and they can add their stuff. And so also, if you know someone that is a farmer and has wool, then tell them about the website so that they can get their information up there as well.
Thank you. Jana is saying that she's suggesting a campaign that seems to be getting a lot of attention is Shave 'em and Save 'em. It's a great name.
I know. I wish Shave 'em to Save 'em was beyond just the US, because it really is a fantastic program. I mean, it could be replicated in Canada. We just need someone who's willing to make that happen.
Tara is saying that it would be nice to have certification programs like animal welfare, regenerative, breed conservation, and suggesting we have a company send samples for Micron. Tara is talking about marketing, and just a few more comments. Any questions? Any last questions? Last call?
Good point, Rosemary. Shout out to our partners at Topsy Farm with their blanket in The Last of Us.
I have a question. I can't seem to figure out how to put my hand up.
Go for it.
All right, I'm curious. So I had no idea. This has been very educational. I had no idea that a scouring center would be the thing that seems to be like the crux. What kind of square footage are we talking about for a building to house this kiwi scouring mill, or whatever the right term is, scouring machine?
Oh man, I'm not prepared to answer that question in terms of square footage. I'm like 25? No, that's not enough. This is where I asked Luke those questions. You know, again, it depends on the size. Like our kiwi scouring facility, our kiwi scouring machine is actually quite small. You could fit it and run it in a 2-car garage. Obviously, you would have to have extra room to drywall. That is going to be the big challenge. And some of the larger scouring operations, you need a much larger room. It's not, I don't necessarily think space is the barrier. It's investment in machines, water, and energy. And it, you know, it's really interesting. I'm working with some professors from the University of Manitoba around wool insulation. And, you know, there's been a lot of talk about wool insulation and whether Canadian wool would be adequate for that. And it's been tested and it's been studied, and it continues to be one of those ideas that could make good use of Canadian wool, replace synthetic insulation, and be a first step in shifting the industry. And the biggest thing that keeps coming up is, well, we were willing to start making wool insulation, but we don't want to wash. We don't want to do the scouring. So that's why I always come back to scouring. There is a scouring place in Ontario that I, as a mill owner, discovered only about a year ago. It's quite large. It's in Blythe, Ontario, and they can do thousands of pounds. And we started actually shipping wool there because we just can't keep up, and it triples our production. We're a small time mill, and when we get scoured wool from them, we triple our production. So we go from being able to do 25 pounds a day to now being able to do 6 pounds a day, or close to that. So imagine how that could change, the ripples that could have on the whole entire industry if all the existing mills had access to that scouring, and then new businesses could emerge. So that's, I get really stuck on scouring in my experience, and also based on the conversations I'm having. So we just, you know, yeah, anyway, I don't know if that answered your question. I maybe went off a little bit on a tangent there.
No, that's good. Like I'm in Alberta, and I'm just thinking about, like, you know, how many empty warehouses are in Nisku right now? I wonder if any of them are for rent or for sale, you know, and how big of a warehouse would it have to be? And, or is there maybe like a community center somewhere that's just super struggling, but would rather close down and be sold to fiber people? I don't know. Got some wheels turning.
Yeah, I think these are really important conversations for us to be having in our communities, and how we can organize, how we can bring jobs to rural communities, how we can limit the transportation of wool overseas, and how we can transform it into products that replace synthetics in our lives.
Yes, and I can confirm I made 2 dog houses, and I knew that there was a chance the insulation might come out. So I used wool for one, and I used denim, that weird denim insulation you can buy. And my dogs prefer the one insulated with wool, and it's warm. -40, no problem. Well, we bring them in the house when it's -40, but -20, -25, they're fine. They love it. So yeah, it works great.
Yeah. Sorry, Alyssa, I'm jumping in because I just read it on chat, but Audra mentioned Edmonton Nisku Scouring Co-op. And it's interesting, I had a meeting, someone from the Biosystems Sustainable University of Manitoba came out here the other day, and we were talking about renewable forms of energy to heat up the water for a scouring system, how we could do it differently, you know, and solar is great, but not necessarily always reliable depending on where you are. And one of the things he mentioned, which I know nothing about this in terms of how it works, but is the sour gas wells and how they burn them off. And that's just energy that's being wasted, right? But there's people doing work to harness that burn off and turn that into energy or to heat things. And I just keep thinking there's so much going on in Alberta in terms of oil and gas and industry and things shifting. What if we were able to shift some of that into scouring, energy for scouring in a more, sustainable, regenerative manner rather than just shutting things down? And I think it hits a lot of targets, jobs, a much needed boost in their industry. I don't know. That is not my area of expertise, so I'm just totally riffing here. But I think we've got enough creative, innovative minds that care about wool that we can come up with some creative options.
No, great point. I think
Yeah,
Matthew's
you've
trying-
definitely given us things about.
Awesome.
We were actually having a call with Alberta sheep farmers last week, and one of the things that came up was, again, Alberta is home to a lot of the fine wool flocks in this country. So again, as a specialized regional approach to look at including the ability to handle fine fiber, because again, like if I can't even tell you the number of times we get called from designers and manufacturers that want to use 100% Canadian wool, but in apparel. And as Anna said, like it's not usually its strong suit, but these clumps of fine wool production in places like Alberta, if we can get more of that to market, there's no shortage of people who would want to use it. So yeah, great ideas.
Yeah. And I love the idea if we approach it from this patient investment, patient capital model, we have the investment in infrastructure and it'll give us time to develop those relationships between textile designers and fine wool flocks in Alberta, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan, and give us the time to develop those networks and better suited infrastructure rather than just a blanket approach. We can be really targeted.
Great. Well, I think we're a little over time, but I think we're doing well overall. Obviously, it was a spirited conversation, and it's always great to hear. I mean, Anna, you're one of the good ones. We're always talking about our, this work is very much like it's coalition building for sure, but it's finding a coalition of the willing and a coalition of people who share the vision of seeing that, we're not living up to our potential in terms of wool, and seeing that there's so much more that can be done and that should be done in order to build the kind of sustainable economy that we will frankly need going forward, and is certainly the vision of our patron as well. So I just want to thank you for taking time to speak with us today, to share your work. I hope we were able to generate some book sales out of this for you as well, and draw some attention. But again, I think what you've highlighted is again just the ongoing importance for us to work together and to bring all of the different players. And I don't think I'm telling tales out of school by saying that not everyone shares that vision. So the important thing is to find the people that do and make it happen, and then we'll let the results speak for themselves. Again, I want to really thank you for being a fellow traveler, for all the work that you do for Canadian Fiber, and looking forward to the big thing. So thank you, Anna, for joining.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, everyone, for coming.